What you see here is the prototype that was built by a young man called Gerin in Paris between 1923 and 1926. And I think it's one of the most important cars of the 20th century. I think that because, first and foremost, it is emphatically not a horseless carriage. It's exactly contemporary with this car here, both from 1923. This one here, pretty much state-of-the-art for normal conveyances, and is still in the classical mould, with the horsepower between two shafts, drive at the rear, separate passenger compartment, and so on. A very conventional car. By comparison, if you look at this, it has all the elements that we recognise in the motor car at the end of the 20th century, insofar as it's chassis-less, unitarily constructed, independently suspended. It has the power unit close to the driven wheels, and the overall form is of an aerodynamically competent pod. In essence, it has all the ingredients of a modern hatchback or people carrier, unlike the car behind. What's extraordinary about this car is that it was designed as a proof of concept for nearly 50 innovations by a man who was only 24 at the time. A man who hadn't been university educated because he was called up during the Great War, and the only engineering he knew was acquired from being a student pilot at the Voisin facility in Pau in the south of France. Importantly though, he was also a prodigiously gifted mathematician at his lycée in Dijon in the south of France. And in my view, it's his mathematical competence which allowed this structure, which is formed, as you can see, of superellipses, to create this satisfyingly organic form. He built the car in order to show his ideas to manufacturers, and if you look at it closely, you can see what they in essence consist of. The suspension, for a start, is very unusual. It's a form of suspension. It's a lever arm suspension with triple concentric coils running in an oil bath, so suspension shock absorbing in one, which he first developed on a propeller-powered car the year before this one, and that is true on all four wheels. The structure itself is made out of duralumin, the hardened aluminium which was pioneered a matter of years earlier for aeronautical applications, and is, apart from the major castings like the floor, which is of another alloy called Alpax, is designed to be bolted together like a giant Meccano set. I mean, as you can see, all the members are bolted rather than welded together. It was designed, according to the patents, to be clad either in fabric or doped paper, as was common aeroplane practice at the time, because one of the signal features of it was to distribute the masses in such a way that you had a low and centre of gravity, and that the overall thing should be light compared to a conventional car of its time. There are many features of it which distinguish it from orthodox thinking at the time. Come towards the back, this, you see the engine is in unit with the transmission. This transmission was originally an infinitely variable friction drive transmission, which, although not the first, was more highly evolved than its predecessors. and which accounts for the very unusual drive arrangement. As you can see from the back, this is one of the few cars in the world which has hubcaps on both sides of the rear wheels, and this is because the drive is actually taken by a dog to the inside of the wheel rim. It must have been a very noisy arrangement, and in the scheme of things is one of the least satisfactory aspects of the design, but necessitated by the very high rotational speed of the friction drive transmission. One of the signal features of the design was that the entire motor unit, including fluids, including all the engine ancillaries, was designed to be removed in 4 minutes, according to the patent, with only one spanner, without dismantling any linkages and so on. So that the owner of the Gerin, you as the owner of a Gerin, would have any kind of mechanical problem, you would take it into your local Gerin dealer. The Gerin dealer would simply remove the hinge up the pointed tail, and take off the cone, which was here, unbolt these 2 rails, and with the addition of a small third wheel, which screwed under the sump, be able to remove the entire motor transmission unit in one, replace it with another, so you could go about your daily business, and at the end of the day come back and have yours reinstalled, also in 4 minutes, at the end of the day. A good idea, which was taken up in principle by Volkswagen and others, but a lot later. Same is true of the shape. Although there are lots of early streamliners, you have to remember that most of the ones that we're familiar with date from 10, 15 years after this. This is 1923. It's one of 4 such vehicles that were produced either as prototypes or as small runs after the Great War, first being the Rumpler, the best known, the Rumpler Topfen Auto, a prototype by a Romanian, Aurel Bersu, and the North Lucas, which was a British Rumpler Light, if you like. But the more you look at this car, the more you see astonishing things. Take the brakes, for example. The rear brakes are drums which are mounted inboard, and mechanically operated. The fronts, however, are quite remarkable because they consist of 4 very large shoes operating on the inside of the wheel rim itself. The swept area is quite enormous. And given the fact that they were hydraulically operated as well, that is also, if not one of the first applications of hydraulic front wheel brakes, the stopping power must have been enormous. So enormous, in fact, that combined with a trailing arm suspension, the thing must have stood on its nose at the first touch of the pedal. There are other small touches as well, which are incorporated into the design. The steering column, for example, is adjustable by hand from the driver's seat. Again, not a first. I think there were some American applications of the same thing, but they required spanners. This is just with your hands. Inside, as you can imagine, it feels pretty much like being in an early aeroplane, and that's where it is aeroplane technology that inspired the whole thing.